This conference will now be recorded.
Perfect. Okay, good morning. I'm online again. I wanted to welcome Nick True to the PCA podcast. And if you have any type of a relationship with money, this podcast I think is going to be good for you. If you happen to be a technician out there that is getting started up as a new working tech in the field and you start making some real money, this podcast could have some really good content for you, because once you start making some good money, it gets very easy to get into some bad habits when it comes to money. If you're an owner of a business out there, an HVAC business, and you seem to get concerned or frustrated about no matter how much you pay your tax, they're still having money challenges, this content we're going to provide you with today, I think, will also be really helpful. So again, I'm interviewing Nick True with Mapped Out Money. And I first heard about Nick on a podcast called I Am a Creator. And the title of the podcast was The True Meaning of Financial Freedom. And I found his story very, very compelling. And what I'll do is I'll put a link to that particular show in the show notes today. And I think that you'll find that information on Nick's background very, very interesting. So Nick and his wife, Hannah, they started Mapped Out Money back in 2015. And as far as I can tell, these two are the real deal. They walk the walk. And I'm going to see if I can draw out some of Nick's history. And I'm sure you're going to find out some great ways that he can help you. All right, so his business has really grown since 2015. He has now about 40,000 subscribers on YouTube. He gets about 50,000 views a month. And as of March, he was growing his email list to over 9,000. So he's probably up above that. And I found some really cool nuggets about Nick in his workup on the show. He got his first early on lessons about money from his dad. His father was in the construction business, a small business owner, and his dad taught him about the true value of money. And he learned at a young age, if I work hard, I help my dad's crew on the job sites, that I'll make some money and I'll be able to get what I want. So that's just really, really compelling, I think. So on that note, welcome, Nick. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Yeah, thanks for having me, Martin. I'm excited to be here. I love talking about money. I love talking about how we can make sure we're using it well, especially if we start making it. So I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, let's pick the story up real briefly from when you first learned about money. It's sort of been a lifelong journey. So take us up from when you started your understanding of money and how you evolved that concept that you learned at a young age into getting your own business started.
Yeah. So my dad, one of the things he taught me, probably less through his words and more through his actions growing up, was that if you really, really want to try and do something, then you should just try and do it and figure your way out, right? And I say this because, and it sets up the money piece perfectly, because my dad started his construction business in '98. He had never built a house before. Now he's a handy guy, and he is very good with his hands and his mind around that stuff. But he had never actually fully built a house, and he just set out to build a house for our family, and basically taught himself how to do it over the course of about a year. He had some drafting experience. He was a draftsman at a architectural firm, so he had some experience there, but never building. And that was his first house he built, and he really liked it. And then he was like, I might, go into this business. And so from a young age, I was always exposed to him figuring out how to run a business and make it work, and then money. And then I think he put me on the job site when I was like 11. And I remember him paying me under minimum wage. I remember making under minimum wage and knowing enough at the time to know that it was under minimum wage and asking him about it. And he was like, well, you're 11. So I can basically, we can do whatever. And
shut up, kid, just get back to work.
Exactly, exactly. And obviously I was 11, so I couldn't do much. I was mostly just going around and picking up after the guys and burning scraps, wood and keeping the job site clean. But um, my dad did do a good job of teaching me that, hey, if you work hard this summer, get a little pocket change, then you can buy something, that you've been wanting, that me and your mom are not going to buy for you, but you've been wanting this thing. And so, whether it was a video game or one summer when I was 15, I had saved up enough to buy a new bike that I was wanting, like a mountain bike, and lots of little things like that along the way that really helped me. And then seeing my dad just go, I want to do this, so I'm going to put my mind to it and do it. Um, was so helpful and encouraging to me when I decided to later launch my own business. I was not held back by the fear of, well, what if it fails? Because I watched my family have this mindset of, well, if it fails, we'll navigate, we'll figure something out. So yeah, I'll kind of pause there, but that's kind of definitely what initially got me interested.
Wow. That's a really interesting story, and I can actually relate to a lot of that. I have very similar upbringing, and it's amazing. You never know how closely your kids are watching you, do you?
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know, that's an interesting point there. All right, so let's go into uh, mapped out money, and let's talk about uh, I want to know, like, what are some of the common threads? So you've been doing this a long time now, and you've developed a customer base, and you've got people that you're engaged with, that you're trying to help with money. What are some of the most common threads that you find across your clientele in their struggles with money? Can you lay
yeah.
those out?
Yeah, so a lot of the people that I work with are small business owners, right? So they're 1, 2, 3 person shops, and whether they're a tech, a contractor, a dentist, whatever they are, they have a lot of the same struggles. Their main struggle starts at this base that I found of mixing personal and business a little bit
Mhm.
too much and not having clear boundaries around what they actually need. And so, what kind of to dive right in, the very first thing I do when I'm working with someone based on what I see is we get super clear on what they need in their personal life. And this is something that the vast majority of people just don't know. They just don't know their numbers. And so if I say, hey, Martin, how much do you and your family spend on groceries a month? How much are your total fixed bills? How much is the debt that you're paying down? How much do you spend eating out? How much do you spend on clothes? People just don't know because we don't track it. We don't pay a lot of attention to it. And so if you're a new tech and you're kind of starting to grow your business and all of a sudden, hey, I'm making a little bit more money maybe than I previously was, it's easy to just ratchet up that lifestyle, right? To all of a sudden match that income. Then you start making a little bit more money, you just ratchet that lifestyle right up alongside it. And we don't ever pause to take the time to actually say, okay, what do I actually need on my personal life side? What kind of life am I trying to create and build? And if we get clear on what number you need to hit in order to provide the life for you or your family that you're wanting, now we can go into the business side and say, great, so now we know our number. So now all we have to do is we can do backwards math to figure out what the business needs to generate to pay for our tools, pay for some of the other operating expenses, save for taxes, and still be able to pay what we need on our personal life. And so at the core, that's the biggest problem that I see is that we just don't have clarity around A, what we want, and B, what it costs on our personal life to do that. If we know those things, then we can more easily build a business that can help us achieve that.
What about what's your opinion on debt? So most businesses, I found from running my businesses is that, when you don't need money, those banks are right there to loan to you,
Yep.
right? When you don't. When
Yep.
you do need money is kind of when they get squirrely on you and stuff.
Yeah.
But bottom line is in a business, especially as your business grows, there is a position or there is a place for debt,
Totally.
but there's a fine line there of using debt to grow your business and using debt as a crutch. So what's your
Yeah.
opinion about that?
Yeah. So again, it goes back to let me actually take one step back and then I'll explain my position on debt because it'll make more sense in context. I want to double click and sort of detail in on what I said about the knowing what you want, right? So why do people get into the HVAC business? Maybe it's a variety of reasons, but generally speaking, someone starting a small business like this is not necessarily doing it because they want to build the next $1 billion Netflix or the next whatever Facebook hot tech thing, right? What they're doing is they're saying, hey, look, I enjoy this type of work. I'm maybe skilled in this area. And really, what I'm interested in is using some level of my skills to provide a life that I want, right? To provide a level of life for my family. And so, really, my experience with small business owners of any kind is I'm doing this because of what it ultimately will provide for me and my family. And when I'm talking about getting clear on that, what I mean is I want you to actually sit down with a piece of paper and write down, what do I want my life to look like in 3 years?
Mm-hmm.
How many hours a week do I want to be working? What hours of the day do I want to be working? Weekends, nights, days? What am I doing? How many hours a week am I spending with my family? What kind of trips am I taking? What do I own? What kind of house do I live in? What kind of hobbies or activities do I have? Right. And what does a general week in my life look like in 3 years? Just a
Mm-hmm.
quick bullet point process, right, of what I want. Pretty quickly, if you have a couple of things written down, then we can make some quick estimates. Okay, well that right there, that's a $5,000 a month life,
Mm-hmm.
or that right there, that's a $10,000 a month life, or that's a whatever a month life that is. We can put some numbers on that. Then we
That's
can go over
fantastic.
then we can go over to the business and say, okay, great. Now if I need my business to pay me $7,000 a month because this is the life that I'm trying to build, then I can now figure out what the business needs to generate based on my margins or based on what operating expenses I have in the business and what taxes, what state I'm in, and what taxes I need to sort of hang out for and plan for. And I can figure out, okay, maybe in order to generate 7,000 take home, maybe the business needs to make 9,000 a month, right? It all depends on your situation, obviously, but just as an example. And now if I know that I need to make 9 grand a month, now I can do backwards math from there and say, great, if I need to make 9,000 a month, what's my average service call cost? On average, if I get called in, what revenue am I going to generate, right? Some calls you're obviously going to make a bunch more because it's a big problem. Others are going to be a little bit, but on average, what is it? If you know that average number, now we know how many calls a month we got to make, right? We know how many services we have to make. And then if we know how many services we have to make, we can figure out the leads that we have to generate. Okay. To answer your debt question, because that's ultimately right. And this is what people do. They jump right into the, oh, I'm trying to build this business, and so said that they took out a loan for 10 grand to get started, so that's what I'm going to do. And they don't think about how much they might actually need. So then, if you can clearly answer all those questions, I need to generate this much in the business. And in order to generate that, I need to do this many service calls. In order to do this many service calls, I need to advertise here, market there, whatever. Now we can actually estimate some rough expenses, startup costs that we need to get going in the business, whether it's new tools that we're buying or whatever it is. Now we have a purpose with that debt. And so now I'm all for, if it makes good sense on paper, to take out a small loan or to try and find financing. Obviously, there's some creative ways you can find financing. It's not always just going to the bank. There's definitely different options, but I'm not super anti-debt when it comes to getting going in the business. I'm anti not thinking critically about how we're going to use that debt in
Mm-hmm.
order to grow our business. Because if we lay all that out, then we're good. And then what I am pretty anti on is, let's not ratchet up our lifestyle
Right.
by taking on debt on the personal side until the business can actually support it. Right. And that's what I see a lot, especially with like service jobs like this. And we'll get into this, I'm sure, but your months vary, right? So 1 month out of the year might be your huge month, and then you might have a month that's lower. And if you go out and take out a new boat loan based on that huge, huge month, right? Hey, this is my new normal. That may not be your new normal, right? And now all of a sudden we overextend ourselves.
Yeah, that is one of the big challenges with the HVAC business in general,
Yep.
because you touched on it right there, Nick. It's very seasonal. And a lot of the contractors, when they're first getting started, like I did, they started out doing residential.
Yep.
Residential has its benefits because it's typically better for cash flow. You don't have the net 30-day terms and all that stuff that goes along with that. But people don't really think about, does my heater need to be replaced? Does my air
Yeah.
conditioner need to be replaced? There's specific years, times out of the year that business can be pretty dead.
Yeah.
And one of the challenges that new business owners have is you have this wave effect, meaning
Yep.
that you sell, you get a bunch of work, and then you're do. You know, you're like your dad did. He's doing the
Yep.
work.
Yep.
And while you're doing all the work, you're not selling any more work.
Yep. Yep.
So what ends up happening is you end up with these ups and downs. And I think you're exactly right on, spot on with that, is that if you have debt, you know, when you're rolling in the dough, it's really easy to get stuck in some bad habits of, like you said,
Totally.
buying the boat, buying the new pickup truck,
Yep.
whatever. And then now you're hitting that debt really hard in the slow period, and it can get kind of crazy.
Totally. Yeah. And so now you're putting all your groceries and household expenses on a credit card so that you can have cash to pay the boat loan or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's tough. And so this goes back to separation of, you know, church and state. We're separating our personal and our business, right?
Two sets of books is what
Two
you're
sets
saying.
of books. That's
Okay.
right. And what I recommend doing, if you're software savvy and you like software, there's some great software tools out there that can help you with this. If you're not super into software, you can facilitate this with bank accounts. But what I always push people on, and I push pretty hard on this, and this is going to sound like pie in the sky when I first say it. Like anyone who's listening and is not brand new and has been running their business for a little while is going to hear this and go, yeah, that sounds wonderful. But that's, you know, rainbows and unicorns. That doesn't exist. And I'm telling you that it does exist, but you got to be patient. And so here's what it is. My goal for all my small business owners, especially if you're very seasonal, is to push really hard to get enough cash in the business to cover your down season. So for me, my business, I teach people how to budget and plan with their money. You can imagine my January is incredible because it's New Year's resolution. Everybody's all gung-ho. I'm going to finally do this. I'm going to finally get my money order this year, right? I might as well be a gym for my business, okay? So New Year's is great for me. But then it starts to slide. And if I lived my personal life based on New Year's January income, I'd be way overextending myself. Mm-hmm. And so this is again where we go back to, once you know your personal number. So I can be candid I'll be candid with some of my numbers. So like for me personally, I pay myself a flat $6,000 a month. That's what my mapped out money business pays me. I pay myself $3,000 on the 1st and the 15th every month. My business, I know it long enough now that I've been in business for a while, so I know my cycles in that every 3-ish months is when I'll have kind of a cycle. And so I'll have a high month, a low month, maybe a sort of normal month, and then it sort of gets back. And so if I can maintain 3 months of cash in the business at all times, now I can always afford to pay myself that flat $6,000. So again, let's go back to some of the examples we're using, or let's use easy examples. Let's say that you want to pay yourself a flat $5,000 a month, and you know your business needs to make $7,500 a month in order to generate that. And you decide, I think if I had 3 months ahead in the bank account built up, then that would weather my storms. And it might be 6 months, obviously, depending on your area and whether you're commercial or residential, your amounts could change. But if it was 3 months for easy numbers, that means that we need to have 7,500, right, times 3 in the bank, 22,500. Mm-hmm. And if we have 22,500 in the bank, if you use a budgeting tool, then you can create different categories and allocate that money accordingly. If you just use bank accounts, I would have a separate bank account called owner's compensation or set aside to pay me or something like that. And then you just put 15,000, which is your salary, times 3 in that account. And then every month you drip your set salary. And so basically, even if you're a one-man show, you treat yourself like you're a big business paying yourself a salary.
Right.
And so that way your personal life now becomes stable, even though the business is up and down.
Yeah. And you
That's the
always have,
strategy.
yeah, you always have the option. So let's say you didn't slow down like you expected.
Totally.
So
Yeah.
building. And
Yep.
let's say, even though you're taking your salary out, you've got some extra cash in there at any time. Cash is no problem to spend. It's
Bingo.
kind of hard to make, right?
Yes.
So you can always bonus yourself if if you're smart about it,
Yep.
and you have that choice. It's better to do it that way than the other way and having to leverage debt because
Yes.
you weren't being smart about it, right?
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And so like if you figure out your numbers, whether it's 3 months or let's say it's 6 months, anything over that 3 or 6 month mark, if you're like, oh, cool, like business has been good, it didn't slow down exactly the way I thought. Now we have more than 3 months ahead.
Mhm.
I'm going to pay myself a bonus this month.
Right.
No problem with that. Right. But in order to get 3 months ahead, that's what I mean with like, got to be a little frugal for a little bit, got to be a
Mhm.
little tight for a little bit. You got to batten down the hatches in order to build those coffers up. Right. And in the meantime, you might be using debt to bridge between here and there, which is okay as long as you've got a game plan for the long term of how you're going to get out of it.
Mhm. Yeah, I remember you talked about accounting systems. I was one of the first adopters of QuickBooks. I've been
Yeah.
doing this a long
Yep.
time, right? QuickBooks
Yeah.
is an amazing program, and I still use it today. I use the online version. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
pitching QuickBooks, by the way, but I ran into a blind spot that almost it caused me a lot of pain in that we issue purchase orders, and I'm not
Okay.
going to get too far off in the weeds with that, but so when you do a cash flow analysis on your business, you got your cash in the bank, you got your
Mm-hmm.
receivables, those are legit, right? And you've got your payables, that's also legit. But there's this gray area called purchase orders. So when you go to buy a piece of equipment, there's that limbo period from the time you
Yeah.
issue the purchase order to the time you actually get the invoice and you book it as a payable, right?
Yep.
And what I had to do is I had to generate my own little spreadsheet that included those POs, which are basically receive or payables that are coming, right?
Yeah.
And and,
Yep.
and it was a big blind spot. I talked to the folks at QuickBooks about it, and they said, "Oh yeah, we could do that for you. You have to hire a developer to develop that report." Like, what? You kidding me? So anyway, I digress a little bit, but just understanding your numbers is the theme here, is the
Yes.
message.
Yeah. And I'm a big fan of most of the time when I'm trying to work with people like this, I'm gonna coach them to think about their business, their small business, in a cash basis manner rather than
Mhm.
like an accrual basis manner. And so that's where everything I've talked about up until this point is with the context of cash is king, right?
Mhm.
And so as you grow your business, you probably will start working with an accountant, maybe especially one for running your taxes, but maybe even for keeping your books or something, you might do that. But it's nice if you also have a system for your cash, meaning whether that's a bank account system where you've got a handful of different bank accounts and you're sending money off to different bank accounts to do different stuff, or you're using a separate budgeting tool to think about your business budget. Because one thing I love QuickBooks. The problem with QuickBooks is it's a reactive approach to money management, right? So it looks in the past and says, "Hey, Martin, here's what you've done." It doesn't do a great job of helping you plan with the cash that you have on hand. And with the mindset of almost that old school envelope budget mentality that people have maybe are familiar with on a personal finance side, right? Sticking your money in little envelopes. I do that on my business side. So I
Mm.
have all these little envelopes that are my business budgets, and I facilitate my cash into those little envelopes based on what I know is coming down the pipeline.
Mhm.
And that helps me plan on a cash basis because I know my business needs X to run itself this month, and I can allocate that money accordingly. And that helps you with a forward thinking approach, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. That does make sense. Hey, one thing I would like to put out there, if you go to Nick's website, mappedoutmoney.com, he's got I think it's on the resource page there. He's got a bunch of books
Yeah.
that he recommends, and I've read a lot of them, and they're excellent places to start. And there was a book I read years ago called The E Myth. I don't know if you ever read
Yes.
that book.
Huge fan.
And yeah, and anyway, make a long story short, just because you're an excellent service technician, just because you're an excellent, the example they used in the book is a poodle clipper, doesn't necessarily mean that you should be in the poodle clipping business.
Right.
So educating yourself on the nuances of business ownership before you make the jump is a really good idea. Because I tell folks all the time, I never went to Harvard Business School, but I know I paid the tuition a couple times over from some of the stupid things I did. So anyway, so Nick, give us a success story. So give us a customer of yours that you took them in and maybe represents kind of a typical situation. Give us a success story that you can think of. I know I'm putting you on the spot here because you didn't know I was going to ask you that, but give me one.
No, it's a good question. So I'll talk about this guy that I've been working with for actually probably like 2 years now, on and off. We worked together very closely for a couple of months to get him set up, and then we sort of hands off, and now we do a check in maybe a couple times a year. But so he's a dentist, and he basically had a very small. And dentists are interesting because they can scale like anything else, right? They can be just a one person shop who they work in an office for another dentist. Or they can obviously have their own offices and multi offices and all this stuff. So at the time that we started working together, and dentistry in particular, they take on a lot of debt because he has to go to school to do all this. And then they also have to take on a lot of debt most of the time if they are going to run their own shop to purchase a office and all their equipment. The equipment's very expensive. And the problem with it as well is like any business, there's lots of ups and downs. And so with him in particular, when he came to me, he was going through a real tough situation because he was in the midst of getting divorced and in the midst of trying to sell his dental practice and then actually move and start a new practice in a different state. And so he had a lot of moving parts and pieces, and between the student loans, the debt on the business, and then just personal debt, it was, a few $100,000 worth of debt. When we started working together, it was, the most paycheck to paycheck thing that you can imagine, right? Constantly throwing stuff on credit cards in order to then pay for bills that have to be paid in cash. And then as he picks up a little bit of money, maybe he does, this new procedure, somebody needs a big procedure, so I'm picking up a little bit of extra cash. So now I'm going to throw that at the credit cards, right? And it's this constant hamster wheel of trying to get off of it. And so the very first thing we did is exactly what I said at the start of this podcast, which is we got extremely clear on what he needs on his personal life. We always start there and say, how much you spending on groceries, how much you spending on your life, how much is your mortgage, how much is your car, all this stuff. We get that number fixed. Then we go to the business and we figure out what the business can actually pay him. And most of the time we realize, your personal life, you want more than what your business can pay you. That's how we got into this problem, right? So then we have a critical question to ask. We say, okay, when you're in this position, you got, more money going out than money coming in. You have two options. Option one, spend less money. Option two, make more money, right? Ideally, we do both. But those are the levers you can play with. Those are the only two levers you got. Spend less, make more. And with him in particular, we did a combination. And so we tried to brainstorm some ways that he could maybe pick up some more income on the dentistry side, just the way he was structuring his offers and the way that he was structuring the way that they charge in dentistry can be a little bit weird, whether you're cash basis or insurance basis. And so we brainstormed some ways to pick up some more cash. And then we also talked about what we could cut. And the critical piece for him is we got really clear on what we wanted his life to look like in 3 years. That was really compelling, right? A really strong sort of compelling case for what matters. And now, all of a sudden, cutting on his personal side doesn't feel that bad.
Right.
And so now selling one of the cars to get that loan payment down and buying a junker for a couple of years doesn't feel like a big bad thing because he knows what it's going to buy him in a couple of years down the road, and he has clarity around that. And so that's what he did. He ended up selling a car. He ended up downsizing the amount that he was eating out and the amount that he was doing on groceries, and really honed in those processes. Those were his bigger hitters there. And then because of the divorce situation, he was actually down in the midst of downsizing housing and getting into apartment anyways. And so that sort of helped take care of itself.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, fast forward to now. We just caught up last month, actually, and it's been about a year and a half. He sold that practice. He's now working in a different practice in a different state. He's not the owner there. He's just working 4 days a week and as kind of an independent contractor for them. He knows exactly what numbers he needs to hit on that business in order to pay himself his take home. And now, Martin, funny enough, he's actually doing something similar to you. He started a new business on the side where he's talking to other dentists now about sort of some of the things he's learned and those processes as well. And so that's his long-term goals. He hopes to have a business down the road as well, doing some of that piece. But he's been able to pay off, gosh, we've got him down to, I think last I looked, maybe 60 or 70 grand of debt left. From a couple 100,000 was really exciting. And obviously the sale of the business helped liquidate some of that. But a big piece of that was figuring out our numbers, getting clear on them, and throwing an extra 1,000 or 2,000 a month because he's so clear on what's going on at this debt. So yeah, he's one I've been working with for a couple of years, and he's a good dude, and he's had a lot of success by just continually hammering away at it.
Is he thinking maybe about starting up his own practice again, or is he just totally cool with what he's doing now?
He's unsure, so he doesn't know yet. I think right now his number one goal is let me get this debt behind me. And right now things are good, let me just keep working this game plan and then, figure things out from there. Cause with starting up a practice for him, there's potential that he might be needing to take on more debt, right? If he's going to buy a practice or at least, getting some of the equipment and stuff. And so I think for him, it's part of it is trying to figure out his own, this is the weird thing about money. Everybody's got their own sort of emotional, mental side of it too, right? And so he's got to figure out for him what he's comfortable with on the debt side, because he's been in debt for so long that now he's starting to see this light at the end of the tunnel. So there's part of him, I think, that, hey, let me just keep working this game plan, get this stuff behind me, and then, go from there. That's one thing so I used to work as before I did this, I used to work as an engineer. And I used to make a joke that like engineers are incredible with numbers and they can calculate all kinds of stuff. They can do wild things, and it's really impressive. But if you put a dollar sign in front of that number, their brain goes out the window, and now it becomes this emotional thing, right? It's so weird with money because money is numbers, except for if there's a dollar sign, it's not a number. It's this emotional thing, and it has all this baggage around your childhood and how you were raised and all these different things that come with it. And so this is where like everyone's got to figure out their own comfort level with risk and reward and debt and where they need to fall in that piece.
That's great. So let's say I want to kind of drill down into our audience out there. So let's say we've got a new HVAC tech. He's maybe 2 years in the field in the apprenticeship program. He gets out of apprenticeship program. He's making, or he good, a 2-year guy is probably making $30 an hour. And before that, he held down, fast food, other jobs making considerably less money. So they're starting to make some real money now. And let's say they start falling into that pattern where their personal spending goes right on up with their income.
Yeah.
And they're starting to feel that uncomfortable feeling when they get the credit card bill every month, and they're in this pattern, and they know they need to do something about it. But they're not sure what to do. So what are some of the baby step things? You mentioned what I call budgeting, understanding where all the money's going. That's important. And let's say they've done all the stuff, they've searched the web, they've watched all the YouTube videos, they're still not making any progress. So they need to get somebody like you, an advisor, to help them out. So first of all, what are some of the things that an advisor, a business like yours, can do for our hypothetical 2-year apprentice that they can't get on YouTube, for example?
Yeah,
What's the value add that one-on-one help can do?
sure. So the main value add is asking lots of questions. And that sounds kind of weird to say it this way, but normally, in my opinion, a good coach who is helping you through something is not going to tell you what to do. I can give you some strategies. I can help lay things out. But if someone was working with me, I'm never going to tell them, hey man, you need to sell that car. Hey, you need to consider moving and downsizing. Hey, you need to stop eating out so much. I'm never going to tell you that. What I am going to do is I'm going to ask you lots of questions to get you to decide what's most important to you. I'll give you a practical example. What I always tell people when it comes to budgeting and reducing spending is that if it feels not fun, you're doing something wrong. This is not meant to beat you over the head. It's not meant to tell you can't have fun. It's not meant to tell you that you can't enjoy all the hard work and the fruits of your labor that you've been putting in. It's a hard job, and I want you to enjoy. What it is it is me helping you get super clear on what you actually care about. So here's the very practical example is we'll go with a new vehicle. So if you and I, Martin, you and I right now, we could go buy the exact same truck. We could buy the same truck, same size, same lift, same towing capacity, same everything. We could spend the same money and we could do it for very different reasons. You might do it because it's part of your business and legitimately you need is a strong word, but you need a truck of that size and caliber in order to fit the type of business you run. And you also need something that is reliable, thus you bought a newer one that's, maybe more reliable. I might be doing it for a totally different reason. I might be doing it because I'm a weekend warrior DIY project guy, right? And so I really don't use the truck day to day, but on the weekends I need to go get some lumber or get a truck bed full of dirt or whatever I'm doing. Or maybe I'm using it purely recreationally because I tow a camper and on the weekends I want to go camp. Or maybe, and what's often most common, I'm doing it to posture, meaning I'm actually not doing it for me. I'm doing it to impress someone else, the people I'm around, the people who told me that whatever, I wasn't worth anything or I wasn't good enough or I never amount to nothing. I'm doing it to fit in, to impress, to posture, to look a certain way or to walk a certain walk. Now, back to the one-on-one, it is never my job to tell you what value, whether it's for recreation or camping or utility or fun or posturing and looking a certain way. I'm never going to tell you what you should value or what you shouldn't. What I'm going to do is ask you, what do you value the most? And is there a way that we can get that value by spending a little bit less money? So I bought a brand new truck new truck for me 4 years ago. Now, this truck was a 2001 7.3 diesel F250. It's a great truck. The reason I bought the truck is because at the time I lived in an RV and I was traveling full time with my wife. And I needed a truck to tow my house, right? And so I needed a powerful truck, but it was purely utility. My truck had ripped seats. My truck has scratches and dents all over it. The truck had 213,000 miles on it when I bought it. But it was a 7.3 diesel, and I knew that if we took good care of it, it would last a long time.
Right.
We bought it for functionality and utility, and we paid as little money as possible to buy the functionality and utility that we needed because our number one value was utility. I'm using this as an example because we bought a dope RV, right? We bought a 2007 Airstream, and we renovated it, and we bought it for 34 grand, and then we put 15 into it to renovate it the way we wanted. So we were looking at our budget and we were saying, what do we care about the most? We actually care about the RV because we're going to be living in it. I don't really care that much about what I'm towing it with. And I could spend $75,000 on a tow truck.
Easy.
Right? But I don't need to. All I need is something to tow that thing. And we wanted to put our money in the RV piece. So all that to say, the value of working with somebody is me just asking you tons of questions and forcing you to think about what truly matters to you. I've had clients who tell me, I had one guy a couple of years ago who said, Nick, this is going to sound kind of weird, But when you ask me that question about what I value with my eating out, I love Chick-fil-A, and I just love everything about it. I love the environment, I love the atmosphere, I love the food. I would like to plan to go there 25 to 30 times a month, basically every day, right? And I
Whoa.
said, well, I'm not your health coach. So if that's what you tell me is your number one value with eating out, are we hitting some of your other long-term goals? Are you able to save and put away some money for some long-term stuff? Yes, you are. Great. Then, hey, man, with your discretionary spending, if you want to eat at Chick-fil-A 25 times a month, let's do it. Right? That's not my value, but that's his, and that's fine. And so that's what I do with people. I ask them, what do you value? What do you care about? Not what your buddy cares about, not what the other tech that you were in the apprenticeship program cares about, not what your boss cares about, not what your extended family or your parents care about. What do you care about? What matters to you and your family, and how can we use your money to do as much as possible on stuff that matters to you? That's it.
So, what's real interesting, I'm having a hard time getting over that Chick-fil-A thing. What went through my mind was Lipitor drip. I don't know. Sorry. So yeah. All right. One of the things I've noticed, and when you and I were communicating back and forth about, setting the show up, I surveyed some of my contacts, and I was surprised at other surveys. There was a high amount of participation, and when I broached the subject of money, not so much,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think what I said to you was, well, it's probably difficult for people to bridge this subject.
Yep.
And so I guess what I'm getting at here is, let's say you're gonna get help. My 2-year technician, he's gonna get help. He's decided to do it, and he's done with all the YouTube videos, which got him nowhere. And what if he's searching for a company like yours? What are some of the questions that should be asked when you're interviewing an advisor? Give
Yeah.
me a top couple.
So first off, it's really important to think about the name, right? So if we use the word advisor in the world of finance, we're probably talking about someone who manages or
Stocks.
does retirement planning, right? Someone who manages investments. That's not what I do, right? And most advisors, and this is not a knock on them, this is just a nature of the business. Most advisors, due to the nature of the way that they get paid and the incentives built into the industry, don't do very much on a day-to-day cash flow budget planning stuff. And so if what you need help with is retirement planning and long-term sort of investment planning, then you should be looking for an advisor or wealth manager. The key term you want to look for there is the word fiduciary and fee only. Those are the two key words I would tell you to look for on that side.
Hold on. So what you mean by that is fiduciary is you're paying the advisor, the financial or the investment advisor, you're paying them rather than them getting paid by the investment vehicles. The
Bingo, right? So fee only means that the only way they make money is by you paying them. Okay. You don't want to be working with somebody, and this will maybe take some people off of their listening, but I'm not a big fan of commission-based advisory most of the time because the incentives can be misaligned, and they may not because they're an evil person, just because the incentives are misaligned and that they are incentivized to sell you certain financial products that may or may not be in your best interest because that's how they make money. Whereas if you have a fee only, and then the word fiduciary means that they are legally, federally bound and obligated to act in your best interest. So if you pair up fee only with a fiduciary, you get a good mix where the incentives are aligned for them for their advising to give you the best advice possible for your situation. Okay. So that's advising. Long-term investment management most of the time. There are a handful of advisors who will talk about day-to-day stuff. Most of them don't. That's not part of their service. What I do would be what falls under a group called money coaching. And we use the word coach because the word advisor and stuff like that, generally you have to hold licenses to talk about investing. So I can't legally, and I won't give you investment advice. I will not tell you what to invest your money in. What I do is I hyper focus on the day-to-day. So if you're struggling with cash flow if you're struggling with just digging yourself out of the paycheck to paycheck, that's what someone like I do. And the questions that you want to ask them is, one would be what you said earlier. Can you tell me about some recent success stories? In an ideal world, this is not always possible, but in an ideal world, you want to try to find a coach who's familiar with your business, right? Because there are different nuances. And so if you can find someone who specifically helps coach people around money for people in the HVAC industry, that would be ideal. I have a financial advisor friend of mine who only works with physicians.
Hmm.
And that's it. And because they have a very unique situation. And so he's found a little niche for himself and he's done very well there. So a couple, again, the questions on the money coaching piece would be, one, like, hey, can you just tell me about some of your success stories? Two would be, have you worked with others in my industry? Do you understand the HVAC business, or at least other businesses that are structured like ours? And then a third would be like asking them what their process is for, and you can use the word process and leave it sort of vague, because what you're looking for is you're looking for someone who has a fairly clear steps 1 through 5 or whatever it is, right? So like with me, I have a 3-step process that I run every client through. And those 3 steps can be tailored because it's not me telling you what to do. It's me asking questions and helping you learn to solve these problems and think through all this on your own so that eventually you don't need me. My goal is that you stop paying me at some point because you can go off to the races. But you want to ask them what their process is. And if they can't explain to you a fairly quick, like, oh, these are the steps I take everyone through and this is the way it works, then that means they probably just don't have their stuff dialed in that much. And so you may want to find somebody with a little bit more experience.
Good. That's good advice. That's really good. All right. Well, listen, we've been at it for a bit. Is there any last minute stuff you'd like to share with the audience there, Nick? I think we covered a lot of really great stuff. Again, I'd like to mention that in the show notes, I'll have Nick's contact information in there, but any parting words of wisdom?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think we covered it. I think, if you're really struggling, maybe I'll touch on that last piece you said. Money's a weird thing, right? And we don't often want to talk about it. And we don't often want to talk about it, certainly not to our friends and family, especially if we're struggling, because we're embarrassed. And there can also be a lot of shame around this. And so that's where, if that is you, my 2 things would be, one, if you don't have any money right now to invest into helping your situation, try to start surrounding yourself with good influences for free information. Find some books. You can go to my website. I've got a list of my favorite personal finance and business finance books on there. Surround yourself with some really good personal finance podcasts just to get them in your head while you're driving around in your truck from job to job. Surround yourself with people who are, even if they're digital people, who are trying to take their money seriously and are willing to talk about it. And then eventually over time, you might reach out to someone as a coach. And what's nice about someone like me is that I'm a stranger, right? I don't know your baggage. I don't know your shame, and I don't care. I'm here to help you figure this out and do what matters to you. I'm not your family member friend who knew you from when you were 12, right? And that's sort of the benefit of having an internet stranger help you through it. So that'd be my last parting words.
Awesome. Well, excellent. Thank you, Nick. I'm going to turn off the recording now.